everybody, and welcome to today's CX Quick Tips. It is April 6th, 2021. For those that are on a calendar fiscal year, we just finished the first quarter. And oh my gosh, for many of us, things have been growing and going like gangbusters. For some of us, it's yet, another iteration of another version of a lockdown. So no matter where you are, what we do know is that Roy Atkinson is going to give us some incredible insights and information that he's going to share with us. Roy, welcome today.
Always good to be here, Jim.
And today we're going to talk about surprises. Goodness knows we've had some immense ones in 2020. Many of them were unwelcomed. And I would dare to say, if we stop and reflect, there's probably many of them that were absolutely welcomed and were very joyous in nature. And we need to keep those rolling. And we want to try to do that for 2021. So Roy, if you could help us a little bit about customer expectations and springing surprises, because there's pros and cons to that, isn't there?
There are. And as you know, as we've had these conversations periodically, I've tried to stay in touch with the seasons. We talked about heat and warmth the last time we were talking because it's wintertime. Now we're springing surprises. And, a lot of organizations spring surprises on customers in ways that customers don't really appreciate. Oh, by the way, that's going to be an extra $32.50. Really? That's going to cost you $79 to have that 2x4 delivered. Great. So customer experience revolves around setting customer expectations and then exceeding them, at least by a little bit. I like what Shep Hyken says about this. Just a little bit. And you do that incrementally and, you're improving the customer experience over time. But we don't want to spring surprises on the customer too often. We certainly don't want to spring unpleasant surprises on the customer. That's not what you want to do. But even pleasant surprises can be a little bit disturbing in terms of the customer experience because we don't always like to be surprised. Not all of us enjoy the surprise party or the surprise present or the surprise reward in front of your colleague. A lot of people tend to shy away from that. So you have to know your audience, basically, is what I'm saying here. And then be careful about how you spring things. But we'll get a little bit more into the idea of not springing surprises at all, but definitely pleasant if you're going to spring something on them, not unpleasant.
Well, as you're talking, I'm sitting here and I'm saying, well, a lot of it is expectation setting. Also, a lot of it is, differentiating. And what I mean by that is I always go back to the story that I heard about Herb, the former CEO of Southwest Airlines, when somebody came to him and said, hey, we need to serve a chicken salad on this flight from LA to Dallas because it's a common flight. It's right in the middle of the day when lunch is, and it would just be a huge value and benefit to our customers. And Herb said, well, is that going to help us turn that plane around faster? Is it going to help us with all the things which were their value statements that people flew Southwest for? And they were like, no. And Herb said, well, we ain't serving no darn freaking chicken salad. So it's like people knew and people understand what they're about. Yeah, you're going to have a good time, but you're not going to get any freaking chicken salad on Southwest Airlines. And so the part of that connection, part of that expectation setting, and maybe even doing that on the front end before you have to deliver something that isn't going to be the most palatable is probably a critical practice that we all need to weave into our quality controls, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've been in touch with your customers, basically, your customers have a sense of what you're about and what to expect from you. But that, again, customer experience is that sum total of all the touch points, right? So as you get to know each other, you get to know the customer gets to know you, and however it is that you do that and however it is that they do that, whether it's just through interactions or whether it's through focus groups or whatever you're doing, you're learning about each other and you understand each other a little bit. I'll just interject. Here's a story of a good surprise. A friend of mine was working for a company that had an annual conference, invited all their big customers to come to this conference every year. And one of the customers loaded their team into an RV that they rented, and they're driving to this conference, and the RV breaks down, and it's a bad situation. They're in the middle of nowhere. They're trying to get a hold of somebody. They don't even really understand where they are in terms of geography. And they called the company. They called their contact at the company And the contacted the company did two things. First of all, he got them in touch with the local tow service to come out and help them. And the second thing was he sent out pizza right to the RV, which I think is absolutely awesome, right? That's great way to surprise your customers. Do something unexpected that really helps them in the situation that they happen to be in. So that's a good surprise. But constant communication is really, really the key to this whole widget that we call customer experience.
Okay, so there's a couple things that I'm seeing you say and within that story that we have to focus in on, and that one is making sure that our system is built for recovery, right? And the other thing is to enable, our people to be able to be flippers, right? To be able to flip a situation that isn't going to end up being the most successful, into something that is probably, even just a little bit less painful. And I think for many of us, and I've experienced this, and I have to be very mindful of this, is that, we don't allow our people to start talking about, and quoting, policy. We don't start talking about, well, you didn't purchase that package, all of those things that, people may not understand all the finer tune and finer prints. Well, it was in your service agreement. What? Like I pull those out, within my, file and look through those all the time. I think it's really, this goes back to everything that we've been talking about for many, many years, quite frankly. And why I even became certified in emotional intelligence is that being more empathetic and more in tune with our customer. It's, how do we go about doing that? And then it becomes, how do we do that at scale? Right.
Absolutely true. And speaking of, user agreements, I was in one of my jobs, the guy who had to read all of them, every word, and understand what we were agreeing to, because I was working for an institution that was involved in ethics. So we had to be very careful about what we were agreeing to when we went through those user agreements. And man, I'll tell you, arcane is not the right word for it. So yeah, help your customers understand. Help them understand. There's a lot of ways to do that, and I've had those discussions with Leslie O'Flanagan, who you also know, and who talks about plain language and making that communication clear and crisp, and making sure that your customers get it.
And that's not easy. So when you start looking at being able to connect, back to that at scale issue. Also, when we start talking about the filters and usually layers that we place on it internally, because, hey, we know our systems and our products and our processes, hopefully better than our customers. But that also means that we have a bias associated with that prohibits us from communicating and connecting as well as we could with customers, because they don't live in our world.
And we don't live in their world. And that's too bad, because we can at least dip our toes in the water in their world. And we do that by doing things like calling our own service desk, calling our own contact center. And one of the famous cases of this that I often refer to with a company that I had some association with over time was Apple's Steve Jobs. When Steve Jobs had a question, or he ran into an issue he didn't understand with one of the computers that he was using, he would call the regular support line just like anybody else. So he got to experience that aspect of their service firsthand, understood the wait time, understood the way that the reps interacted with people. And I believe that had a major impact on his thinking over the years.
And many organizations always talk about how do you engage executives, and one way is having them do that, and even double jack or be part of the agents, maybe even answer calls depending on the complexity of your products and all of that. And so getting in closer in tune with the customer, for all of us, is something that we always have to work on. Now, one of the ways you talk about doing that, and we had this discussion before we started recording, is that you look at really 4 things you had mentioned. You looked at customer service, customer experience, you looked at employee experience, and then you also looked at appropriate technology. Now, you also mentioned something about things that I think are really important when you start looking at enablement, right? So if we're talking about giving our people the tools, we start talking about those types of things. It is a huge motivational aspect of our jobs when we feel we have what we need in order to be able to serve our customers.
Absolutely.
So what is when you've seen some of the impacts when that doesn't happen? So in other words, I kind of feel like I'm handcuffed. I can't serve customers. What are the symptoms that people experience when that occurs?
Well, one of the things that happens is, and you and I both know this from our history with working with people and supporting people in contact centers, is that sometimes the tools are just too complex, or there are too many tools that it takes to get the job done. So you're working with a rep that's got 18 screens open. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but a lot of times it's 6, 7, 8 different tools that they have to use in answer your question, or order you something, or support you in some way. And that's inappropriate. And what happens is people feel like they don't have the resources they need. They feel a little bit lost, and they feel that the organization is not supporting them. And that's not a good thing to feel. That's really demotivating when you feel like, well, yeah, I'm here and I'm doing my best, but the organization really doesn't care about me as a person. They don't even care about enabling me to get the job done. And so that's pretty scary, because that indicates to the rep that's trying to support the customers that the organization doesn't support the customers, because they're not getting the appropriate tools. So that's tough. That's really tough. Been there, done that, and it is not a good feeling. It's like trying to build a house when the only thing at your disposal is a stapler. It's not good. You need the hammer, the nails, the power tools, and everything else. So give the people the power tools.
Roy Atkinson, always a good time to chat with you. Thanks for being with us on CX Quick Tips. How do CX Quick Tips with listeners and watchers get in touch with you?
Always Roy at cliftonbutterfield.com, or on Twitter at Roy Atkinson. And you can certainly find me on LinkedIn as well.
And he's also a frequent contributor to CX Global Media. Roy Atkinson, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thanks, Jim.